Hello and welcome to the Bloodstream Podcast, a show serving the greater bleeding disorders community, brought to you by Believe Limited and Bloodstream Media and made possible thanks to our presenting sponsor, Takeda. I am your patient, advocate, and host, Patrick James Lynch.
And I am your healthcare advocate, nonprofit nerd, and your other host, Amy Board, reminding you to please speak with a medical professional before making any treatment decisions.
On today's show, Erik Berntorp, medical doctor, researcher, and professor at Lund University in Sweden. He joins us to discuss something very special related to von Willebrand disease.
That is great and cool.
And Matthew Zachary, award-winning Cancer Maverick, keynote speaker, and pioneering podcaster.
A pioneer?
We've got a pioneer. We've really stepped up our game. We have got all that and more on this episode. Welcome to Bloodstream.
Listeners, as always, thank you for joining us. And if you like what you hear, subscribe to the Bloodstream Podcast wherever you listen to this podcast. And remember that you can also watch the show on Facebook, which is cool.
That is cool. I also want to remind you, dear listeners, that the Bloodstream Podcast is indeed made possible thanks to our presenting sponsor, Takeda. Yes, that's right, Takeda. Takeda has got this website, bleedingdisorders.com, where you can learn all about Takeda's resources for and commitment to the bleeding disorders community. And Takeda believes in a world free of bleeds, Amy.
We love it.
It's true.
We love it.
And they're dedicated more than ever in their efforts to offer a wide range of programs and support to help patients throughout their treatment journey, wherever on that journey they may be. And you can learn more by simply visiting bleedingdisorders.com. One more time, just in case, bleedingdisorders.com. And for their founding and ongoing support of the Bloodstream Podcast, I would just like to say thanks, Takeda.
Thank you, Takeda. Hi.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good.
What's going on in your world?
Good. No, everything's good. It's summer, so we're full tilt busy here.
We both got the memo about wearing black. So that's good.
We did. We were both wearing black today. We're super profesh. I think a lot of us in the bleeding disorder community, if you're like looped into your chapter, your local chapter, summer is a widely, hugely busy time because kids are off of school. And so there's loads of programming. Summer camps are going on. I know there's tons of bleeding disorder camps
that
have been happening across the country. And it's the same thing here at Believe Limited. We have tons of stuff, tons of shoots, tons of programs. So anyway, we're just crushing it. We're
just doing the summer. We're doing those summer months.
I will say, I think, listeners, this is cool. We have, Erik is actually going to speak with us today with you actually about vWD. Mm-hmm. And then next episode, just to like tease, next episode, we actually have a patient story who wrote into us. Thank you so much. Who wrote into us who also has vWD type 3. And we have some really cool, I think, propelling information, research, science happening in that space. Like, what a cool space to be watchful of. We haven't been able to give any updates on vWD in ages. And you actually wrote, I wanted to bring it up because you actually wrote a phenomenal piece about vWD on Facebook, and you also posted it on LinkedIn. And I guess I just wanted to give you a space to share a little bit about why that was important to write and like what was your passion behind that?
Sure. So, and I'll do so while giving some context for what I actually wrote about von Willebrand disease. My brother's birthday was on July 2nd, and every year as his birthday approaches, I think about something that I'd like to say with respect to his birthday. And sometimes it's relatively simple, and sometimes I'm trying to say something a little bit deeper. And this year, as I was kind of thinking, that just the day before, I was like, how am I feeling? Exploring how I'm feeling. And this anger that was there for a little while was still there. And when I kind of started to write and unpack that, I realized, my brother died because he did not have treatment in his body at the time he sustained a life-threatening head injury. And so for the 17 years since he's died, his story for me has meant, look how important it is that we have treatment for something like hemophilia, for this bleeding disorder. And a couple weeks ago, I heard from somebody at ISTH who was sitting in a meeting during which a hematologist stood up and very skeptically questioned the need for von Willebrand disease patients to have treatment at all. And I get it. 1% of the population has von Willebrand disease, 90% are undiagnosed. That's a lot of people. And if all of them needed treatment, it stands to reason that 90% of people wouldn't be undiagnosed. I get it. Not every single human being with von Willebrand disease probably needs treatment. But in the context of a medical meeting, to stand up amongst those who have dedicated their career to working on these therapies in the company of certain people who are patients or caregivers to folks living with von Willebrand disease themselves, to simply dismiss the very concept that treatment is necessary is so radically off base. And I didn't have anywhere to express that. I didn't know what to do with that. I didn't understand how upset it made me. I didn't even understand that it connected to my brother's death until I started writing and realized, oh, that's why I'm angry, because it's beyond obvious. We would never question a male with hemophilia and their need for treatment. But we do that with von Willebrand disease. But we do that with women with hemophilia. But we do that with people of color. Like, what are we doing? What are we doing? We have science that is developing treatments and working towards cures. We should be supporting that with everything we've got. And if you're skeptical about the need for certain scientific exploration, please provide reasoning. Because to stand up in a room like that and question that, not to even question, but to debunk the idea means you're not talking to the patients who tell you about a period that lasts for 2 or 3 weeks or never frankly ends. You're not talking to the patients who won't go out on a date because they're afraid to kiss somebody because their mucosal bleeding is so bad. You're obviously not talking to human beings. Maybe get out of the conference room and go speak to some human beings, then come back and tell us what you learned. I'm obviously still riled up about it, and I'm not sure what else to do, but I guess thank you for the chance to at least bring it forward on Bloodstream and share a bit more of it here with our audience.
I think to generalize something like that is just really dangerous. To generalize that an entire population doesn't need treatment is just quite frankly reckless. And bravo for saying something. Bravo for being, a patient advocate in that room where I'm sure there aren't, too many patient advocates in the room. I think it's a good setup to some of the work that is being done in the vWD space, because for the first time in a long time, we have some wheels, starting to churn, and those folks that very much do, because it's true. There is a slice of that population that desperately needs treatment. They need better treatment. They need options. Bravo.
Thank you. Well, I am pleased, I suppose, that we're talking about this on the episode where Erik Berntorp is to appear, because he's a remarkable individual that I only learned about in the recent past. So, as mentioned in the intro, he is a hematologist, a researcher, a professor at Lund University in Sweden. He's recognized around the world for his work in bleeding disorders. But in particular, and he's had various leadership roles, World Federation of Hemophilia, Medical Advisory Board, other things as well. But why he became someone of interest to me is because he co-leads these very special von Willebrand disease workshops that take place in Finland and on the Åland Island, where Dr. Erik von Willebrand first diagnosed Hjort's Sundblom, a teenage girl, with what became von Willebrand disease about 100 years ago. And so these sessions gather researchers and hematologists and medical stakeholders from across the bleeding disorder spectrum, and they mirror the journey that Erik von Willebrand took and go from Finland to the Åland Island. They meet with the family members, the descendants of Hjort's Sundblom. They meet with the people, and they get the experience of this remarkable island, while also being steeped in the history and medical science of the moment. So it's kind of like the best of a medical guided tour meets your favorite ISTH symposium on von Willebrand disease.
Cool.
And set against this like incredible backdrop. So when I found out that Erik was the guy who ran these, shout out to Glenn Pierce for making the connection, I just wanted to meet him, talk to him, and hear what he had to say. So you're going to hear this brief segment from a short conversation that I had with Erik Berntorp. That's coming up right now. I guess as a starting place, what first got you interested in all this?
I have been working with clotting disorders, especially bleeding disorders, since 1984, and von Willebrand disease is, of course, one, together with hemophilia, one of the major diseases to work with. And von Willebrand disease was first described by Erik von Willebrand in 1926. And the index case was a girl from the Åland Islands. And you know, the Åland Islands are located in the Baltic Sea, not far from where I live. It's between Stockholm and Finland. So it was quite natural for me to become interested in that. And then I started these meetings, which are a mix between scientific meetings and historical meetings.
From a historical point of view, what do you generally tell people about the Åland Islands, about the Sundblom family in general? What tend to be the highlight points?
Well, the highlight is, of course, the journey that we do. It's a bus and boat journey from the main island in the Åland Islands. There are around 7,000 islands there, you know, to Fögle, where this index case, Hjördis, lived and died at the age of 14. And there we visit her house, we visit the graveyard as well. And we usually have a guide who talks about the Åland Islands in general, but then we also speak to the family, and we walk into the house and look at the facilities there. So it's, I think people like this very much. It becomes quite emotional, in fact.
Why do you think that is?
Well, you know, many scientists have worked with von Willebrand disease during the years, but I mean, they worked with tubes and they have seen patients, but they have never realized the origin of the disease. And you know, it's quite remarkable really to go back to the index case, the origin, and to meet the family 1 or 2 generations after the index case. Most of these meeting participants speak to the family. I usually call them a couple of months ahead of the meetings and tell them that now 30 people from all around the world will come and see you in September. So how is that okay for you, etc., etc. And they are very enthusiastic and positive, yes.
How many of these have you done, and what do you most enjoy about doing the tours?
We have done 6 tours. We are planning a new one for next year, which is the 100th anniversary of the first publication of this index case, which was in 1926. The first meeting was in fact in 1998, so it was 27 years ago.
So what do you personally most enjoy about these trips?
Well, it's the historical flavor, and it's also to get together with all colleagues working with this disease. You know, they come from almost all over the world. It's really a mix among many, many countries.
PJL, that was awesome. Thank you so much for joining us, Erik, and how fascinating, and just what a great little connection. Shout out again to Glenn Pierce for making that connection for PJL, and Erik Berntorp. That's awesome. What do we got next? What do we got next, Patrick?
From one direction into a very another direction. So we're going to leave the world of hemophilia for a moment to hang out with some of our friends over on the hemonc side of the ward. What?
Hello.
Matthew Zachary. Matthew Zachary, he is a prominent, outspoken, and prolific cancer advocate and media professional. I'm going to read you his bio because he deserves it. Dubbed the people's voice in healthcare by People magazine, Matthew Zachary has transformed personal adversity into a global movement for change. Yeah. Diagnosed with brain cancer in 1995 at the age of 21, Matthew beat the odds and emerged as a powerful advocate for patient rights and empowerment. As the founder of Stupid Cancer, he ignited the young adult cancer movement, giving voice to millions of cancer patients, survivors, and caregivers overlooked by traditional healthcare. As the creator of the Stupid Cancer Show, the first healthcare talk radio show before podcasts were a thing, Matthew pioneered a new way to build a global cancer community in 2007. His groundbreaking podcast, Out of Patients, and the award-winning documentary, The Cancer Mavericks, has cemented his reputation as the podfather of healthcare and one of the most trusted, irreverent, and influential voices in the industry. What more can I say? Ladies and gentlemen, Matthew Zachary. We were just talking about your studio, though, Matthew. Now, I was with you in your studio in 2018, maybe it was, but as memory serves, I think that was somewhere else in the city. Have you moved locations?
That was the Stupid Cancer Show studio in 2018.
Got it. Okay, so this is a new location, new show, new studio. But I don't want to jump ahead. I want to kind of start. You're a prolific podcaster. Stupid Cancer is a part of your world. Out of Patients, your podcast. But I want to start with piano because once upon a time, like me, you are an artist and you were on a track to become a concert pianist, and then life took an unexpected turn with a brain cancer diagnosis at the age of 21. So big question here for you to take where you want, Matthew, but how did that experience shift your perspective at 21 years old?
Kind of a loaded question.
Yeah, I like to start light.
Yeah. Deep end of the pool. I get it. Thank you, Patrick. I would say that your 20s are a time in your life where you're supposed to be taking 10 steps forward every day, jumping off roofs, doing stupid shit, testing the waters with your hormones and whatnot. And not a time to get told you have 6 months to live and lose your fertility and everything else in your life. So I was classically trained for 10 years at that point. I started when I was 11. I learned jazz. I learned standards. I learned pop. Back in the days of Sam Goody, getting Billy Joel sheet music for the girls to like when I'm playing scenes from an Italian restaurant. That was kind of my life. While my friends were like working at Calder and Kmart, I was working at an Italian restaurant, literally every Friday and Saturday, playing as like the lounge lizard at 16, 17, 18 years old. So it was my life. My mother's a film historian. I'm a film guy. I love soundtracks. And I went to college to do all that stuff. And I was supposed to go to USC Film School to be the next John Williams or similar kin to that, and then that happened, and then it all fell apart. And I kind of tell it like it's someone else's story at this point, but it's pretty horrible. And my entire life got ripped away from me against my will. So there really wasn't a pivot. It's more like just when am I going to die?
Wow. At what point did that shift? At what point did you realize, okay, I might not die and I might need to think about my life a little differently?
I'm going to give a lot of discredit to the 1990s. For context of your listeners and viewers, this was 30 years ago, and that healthcare has changed for the better or the worse. Survivorship has changed. That word didn't exist in the 1990s. And it was kind of like, yeah, you'll be fine. Walk it off. Get on with your life. Have fun. Figure it out on on your own. I think Yahoo had just come out, and like maybe there was AOL. Like this was like floppy days times, like pre iMac, like some context to American society at this point now.
Yeah, we're playing Doom on Windows.
Castle Wolfenstein was kind of my preference. Or Myst, MYST. Remember Myst? Yeah, that was.
Of course I do.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was playing. Myst and Castle Wolfenstein, pretty much. Doom was more of a PC game. I'm a Mac guy, so
yeah, well, that's fair. Yeah, Dad started me on the PC, but I digress. I apologize.
No, don't apologize. I'm an '80s. We're '80s guys, so what the hell? You got more hair than I do anyway.
Ourselves.
So you got the I don't know, the Def Leppard hair going on there. I don't know what your secret is, but good for you.
Thank you. Lots of conditioner.
Yeah, me too. I didn't know it was possible to have a life. I was just living what was given to me. I didn't know, and how could I? It didn't really exist as structure in society that I had the means to do anything else. That I didn't have support. I didn't have, today it's mental health, but I didn't have anything to. Remember like the Rob Schneider, you can do it. I didn't have that guy rooting for me in the crowds. So I kind of just like aimlessly succumbed to whatever I was going to be doing. And plan B was I got a job in the Don Draper world without the misogyny, I suppose. It was 1996. And I just started fixing computers, and I started learning creative and desktop and implementing Quark Express and ISDN lines and proxy servers, and like I knew how to punch panels and Ethernet cable. I was doing all this crazy, ridiculous IT crap. All my friends went to grad school. I didn't have a social life. I went out, I couldn't drink. I could barely eat. All the side effects were just plaguing me. Everything really changed when my life is very Forrest Gump-ish. I happened to meet a gentleman named Craig Lustig. And it all happened because I was able to rehab myself on the piano. It took me 5 years. And as an artist musician, you know when you've reached a certain achievement. And I knew I would never be who I was before I was sick, because you can't recreate 11 years of training, in 5 years when you're incapacitated most of the time, and then your left hand atrophied across the period of time from your diagnosis to your treatment.
Sure.
But I was good enough, I guess, for myself. And back in the day when you could do this, I produced some CDs. I went out to LA. My friend who did go to film school for audio engineering, Michael Babcock, invited me out to his studio, which I name drop was Hans Zimmer's studio that he was interning for. Okay. This was like pre Speed Hans Zimmer. Like this is like pre-Interstellar Hans Zimmer. Like who the hell is this guy Hans Zimmer? And I recorded some music on the piano in that studio. Mike produced, mixed, and mastered. I got DAT tapes. Remember DAT tapes?
What? Yeah.
We're old. And I brought them to like disc makers, and I produced some CDs, and I started just giving them away for free, and I got invited to play again. And it was really a nice sort of getting parts of my life back. But Craig got a copy of my music somehow, and he was on the board of the single most prestigious nonprofit patient advocate group in the country called the National Coalition for Cancer Survivorship. You can Google it, NCCS, founded in 1986, the country's oldest survivor-led lobby group. Really meaningful stuff. But he happened to be on the board, and he asked me, how'd you like to be a cancer advocate? To which I replied, what the is a cancer advocate? What does that mean? And he basically said in no small terms, you're going to help the next you get less. I'm like, sign me up. And that was, if you want to think about it as like the outlet on the wall from which the cord began to snake.
Yeah.
That was the moment.
Wow. So then what's the dotted line from there to the founding of Stupid Cancer? And why did you go off and found Stupid Cancer?
So the dotted line is more of like a tin can with a string that you're talking to someone else with, because there was no internet back then. So in meeting the leadership at NCCS, the National Coalition for Cancer Survivorship, it was kind of like an Alice in Wonderland rabbit hole. And at that time, people may remember that this was the heyday of the yellow wristbands. before the crash and burn of the Livestrong brand. That was a real solidarity moment for this country that I think gets kind of brushed under the rug a little bit too much.
Yeah, I remember that that was what, early 2000s, somewhere
that was
around there?
Kind of like 04 to 08 was like the heyday of the wristbands.
Okay.
And I volunteered for Livestrong because they were starting something brand new. And again, I was just learning at that point what all this stuff was. I still had my job and I was trying to figure out, am I going to do this? What does this mean? What's my version of making someone else's life suck less?
Yeah, right.
And they started something called the Young Adult Alliance. And this is really seminal from like a historical perspective. And just a plug for, I did a documentary on Spotify called the Cancer Mavericks, 8-part series. You know this. And it details the history of cancer patient rights in the country since the 1950s. So the Young Adult Alliance talked about how survivors in their 20s and 30s, which is like a mixed bag of like unsung invisible age brackets. It's kids and old people. If you're diagnosed in your 20s and 30s, you die more, you suffer more, you cost the system more. And that wasn't okay. So what needed to be done to give rise to what I back then would be called like Gen X cancer advocacy? And now it's like Gen Z cancer advocacy. And it really taught me what programs were. I met social workers, I met nonprofit executives, I met policy wonks, and I kind of got like a 6 MBAs and MPHs worth of education in 2 years incubating at the Livestrong Young Adult Alliance. And the aha moment was, I'm just going to start a brand. I'm going to launch a brand. Livestrong was the only brand in healthcare at the time. Everything else was like pink this and green that and body part this and someone died that. Not to take away from their value to society, but I'm a brand guy. And I said, what would a 28-year-old say in 2006 if they're told they have cancer? They go, "Oh, stupid cancer." And that's how the brand kind of came to be. It was what Homer Simpson would say. So from there, I built the brand deck, the guidelines, the style, the promise, the whole shebang that you'd normally expect when you're building a brand. And I launched it in collaboration with the entire network of hundreds of people I met at the Alliance. And to say it became like this lightning rod happy accident is an understatement. Because within a month, the New York Times did an expose on me, and I had no idea how. And 2 months later, I was given a microphone, and you know this, and I launched the world's first, wasn't even called a podcast, on May 28th, 2007, called The Stupid Cancer Show. And I think they called it like streaming blog radio show something. Like there were no words. This is way before the iPhones and iPods existed. That's where podcasts came from. Fun fact for listeners and viewers for you to know that. Check it out. That's where it came from, the iPod. But I started streaming a live internet radio talk show. Maybe those are better words for it. On May 28th, every Monday from 8 to 9. And I'm an NPR junkie, so I programmed it. And because you're first, everyone glommed, holy shit, he's speaking my language. He's an entertainer. He's funny. He's talking bullshit. And I'm calling things out, and I'm telling stories. And, there's an artistry to being behind a microphone and talking to people, and I'm gifted with that knack. But the brand just started to take off. And 2007 was just this galvanizing year that codified what I felt had become my destiny. So I started to de-Velcro myself from my day job and to make a living, just consulted here and there. But that was the year, the launch of the Stupid Cancer brand around the world.
Unbelievable. Wow. And then your journey there, at what point did you decide, okay, I think my focus here is done and I want to now put my time to some other projects? How did the transition away from Stupid Cancer come about?
Yeah, and I love answering this question because it's like the succession plan that went right without a succession plan. It's one of the few times in the annals of anything that a founder leaves on top, doesn't stay too long, allows the legacy and the footprint to manifest its own destiny without that person at the helm. And hopefully leveraging a successor who can make it their own, but keep the originality of the promise and the purpose. So, I mean, we raised $20 million. We invented the cancer trade show. We invented the cancer road trip. We sold our own version of wristbands, magazine covers, opened the stock market, opened the Dow Jones, opened the NASDAQ, traveled the year, like insane things that you probably couldn't get away with these days in today's culture. Like 1,000 young adult survivors at the Palms Casino for 4 days, getting drunk, gambling, smoking, drinking outside the melanoma, and having the best time of your life. Yeah, not okay today. Change the world that way. We launched the world's first peer-to-peer cancer matching app, which then became, like some version of Tinder or whatever, like the precedents we set, which couldn't do apps in 2013. At some point, and I have beautiful twins who were born in 2010. That's a separate fertility advocacy story because I was infertile. But by the time they turned 8, they get sentient.
What is that?
They start to realize that daddy wasn't there. They move from like meatloaf to human.
Mm-hmm.
And it dawned on me that I was my job still fun? One of the blessings and curses of corporate success is that you kind of lose the honeymoon period. Which for me, the honeymoon period was from like 2007 to 2016. It like never ended.
Pretty good honeymoon.
Years of awesome. It's a great honeymoon. But it started to just become a job.
Yeah.
And it got a little de-risked with societies changing. And we were now talking to younger millennials instead of Gen Xers who are graduating to be above 40, like I became in 2014. And I just, mostly for family, but I really just said, I think I'm done. I think I'm done. So between realizing the only way up was out the window, I kind of like creatively defenestrated myself from my own founding of the organization. And yeah, I'm going to say I haven't looked back since. It's been all those years since 2019. But I will give credit where credit is due to the board who did stay, because half of them kind of freaked out and left. And some of my colleagues who kind of stood the test and did the executive search and found an incredible woman named Allison Silverman, who's been running it ever since. It was a lightning rod, because I was very, very well known by that time in my community, and I was the last person anyone would ever think would step down. So why'd you leave is probably on the Mount Rushmore of questions I get, but I'm glad I did. I'm glad it's still there to serve the next generation, but I'm no longer the right person to do that. And you have to start to look at what else can I do.
And did you have a vision for what's become Out of Patience at that time, or did that evolve during the interim period?
Well, I didn't want to let the show die. I think there were 4.8 million streams after 500 episodes by then, and it had to continue in some form or fashion. So I made a deal with the organization that I want to keep the show, but I'll rename it. So I took a hiatus in 2019, and I brought it back as Out of Patience. So it's a semi-continuous, longest-running podcast in the world from that perspective. But I wanted to name it something that was equally as angst-ridden and sort of in your face and tongue-in-cheek.
And how do you decide on the topics, the guests? And now you've been doing this for a long time. How do you do it in a way that keeps it fresh, keeps it interesting for you?
I don't care who they are or what they do. I care how they will make my listeners feel when I talk to them.
Wow.
And I think that's the art of radio.
Say more about that. Say more about where you see that done well. Like, where did you get that from? How did you develop that perspective?
I think it's just stage presence. I've given hundreds of keynotes, and I have a feel for audiences, and I know how to serve what's needed into the zeitgeist and the psyche of attendees. So I've interviewed thousands of people. They're not all winners. Most of them are. But I don't look at editorial calendaring as value. I look at what matters to me to make my listeners feel something that matters to them. And if there's 2 or 3 sort of through threads, it's permission to be pissed. Sometimes it does work. Here's what you can do if it doesn't. Or I had no idea this existed and this is awesome. one of my favorite shows, totally spontaneous. I met a guy who was like a descendant of the Dexter's Lab guy that invented 7-Up.
Okay.
Like he invented 7-Up.
Okay.
But fun fact, 7-Up was a apothecary tonic at its start, like Coke was cocaine.
Right.
It was made with lithium and soda water.
Really?
And sugar. Lithium, which is now back, apparently, as a mood elevator and a more natural, is the most common element in the universe and on Earth. Its atomic weight is 7.
Okay.
And it peps you up. So 7-Up. And we talked about lithium across the years. And eventually when some Pepsi or whatever bought 7-Up, they delithiumed it. But now he's actually selling the original lithium formula that his like great grandfather or whatever was doing. It wasn't like pitching his products. I don't do like paid sponsor, buy this shit stuff. But I love the fact that that was a left field show.
Wow.
That was like, holy, are you serious? Like I got the guy that like the 7-Up guy was on my show.
Talking about lithium.
So,
lithium recipes.
Yeah, to talk about lithium in like soda and like whatever. But in those cases, the feedback that I get is like, we just like hearing Matt like learn shit. Because like I like to be surprised. And I mean, Rogan is really good at like having decent reactions to shit he doesn't understand. I think there's a level of, whatever your judgments are of his decision making, he's really good at wanting to be educated.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
As a host of his show. And I mean, I came before him. In fact, the only people that were on the radio in 2007 were Adam Carolla, Adam Curry, Bill Burr, and Howard Stern. That was it. I think like Mark Maron came a year or two later, and all these other people started to show up afterwards. But Rogan's style is very much modeled after Stern and Mark Maron. You want to have a conversation that makes you think. Otherwise, it's just boring because you already know everything about that person.
Right.
So, kind of a long answer to a short question. I don't really think about themes. I just identify people that I think I'd have a phenomenal conversation with when listeners wish they were kind of in the room with us having a beer.
Well, we'll put a link to the 7-Up episode in the program notes, mostly from.
I got to find it. Remind me after the fact. I'll send you the link to the 7-Up guy.
Yeah, I got to hear that now, and we'll share it as well. So you touched on the audio documentary series, The Cancer Mavericks, A History of Survivorship. I want to ask you about that a little bit more, though. What motivated you to want to create that? What space were you filling with that wasn't necessarily being filled through Out of Patience?
No one had ever told the story of the people upon whose shoulders we stand that made everything possible today to be a better problem to have. And I'm a student of history. My parents are both educators, high school and grade school. And I was really upset that all these luminary humans that were the invisible heroes of a chunk of America had never been recognized or heralded in sort of the mainstream domain. And I hired like the former head of like Slate Podcasts to put together a team of 9 journalists, spend a year putting this together. And I storyboarded 350 pages myself because I wanted to tell the story. I mean, something as simple as how did the National Cancer Act become a thing in 1971? No one gave a shit about anything in the 60s except civil rights, but that wasn't healthcare. Kennedy and Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. It was a rough decade. Meanwhile, like Sidney Farber of Dana-Farber is trying to figure out how do you help kids not die from cancer, but everyone else was just kind of like dying from cancer. And listeners will hear in chapter 1, there's a woman named Mary Lasker, a very wealthy, erudite, Upper West Side person who her husband got sick. And then she had to convince Richard Nixon to do something about it. So she took out full-page ads in the Times and the Post, shaming him to millions of people. It wasn't quite you stupid do this, but it was pretty much what it needed to be in 1970 for him to give a shit and be shamed because he knew what was coming down the pike with Watergate. So Mary Lasker is the reason we have the National Cancer Act. The first African-American doctor who decided that cancer patients need navigation and not just medicine, Dr. Harold Friedman, invented that. And guess who helped them do breast cancer screenings in Harlem? The Black Panthers.
Oh, wow.
So it's those kinds of things that are so important to understand that when I get up on stage and I tell my story, I'm not telling my story, I'm telling a history story. Because if you don't appreciate how far we've come based on understanding where we came from, you don't have the perspective of realizing things are so much better now with different problems that I'd rather have. And that's why I wanted to tell that story.
Well, and to that point, better problems I'd rather have. I mean, I certainly appreciate that as someone with hemophilia, the picture in the 1960s, the 1970s, even the 1980s. I'm right on the cusp of people with hemophilia who had reliable, safe treatment product. In fact, I contracted hepatitis C from contaminated blood products. So I myself was affected, though naturally cleared it, thankfully. And I say all that to say I appreciate your point about context. We're living through right now a time that feels quite uncertain, anxious, tumultuous. And from a healthcare perspective, from an advocacy perspective, I know at least in my sphere, there's a lot of fear and uncertainty, worry. I'm wondering from your perspective, how do you see the role of patient advocacy in our current climate? And maybe a comment or two on how media, given your work in media, how media can help shape patient advocacy in our current climate.
Our country's at a pivoting point right now, which may or may not have something to do with what they're doing to destroy research, hide data and fire science, from our culture. And I don't think anyone voted for that part, but it does force us to rethink what advocacy should mean. My sense is it's no longer making the next you have a less shitty time. It's forcing the system to guarantee that you have a less shitty time. I can reveal on your show that I'm launching this fall, or whenever this airs, America's first electioneering strategy for patient advocacy, starting in oncology.
Wow.
And what that means is, what would the NRA look like if it were for patients' rights? That's what this is coming to a head with. And unless elected officials are threatened with electability issues from their constituents who are cancer survivors, advocacy is still going to just mean hoping something exists to do, or just being hopeful that your insurance will let you get this medicine, or your doctor will tell you about this medicine, or some stupid pharma commercial will prompt you to ask your doctor about something, and you navigate a 1970s mall with no directory and no stores in it. So lobbying up until this point has largely been telling your story to Congress, but not threatening them with electability. So I believe it's time to do something that is unprecedented in the 200 and some odd years of this country, which is don't just turn gun owners into a voting block. You turn every cancer patient into a voting block. And then you turn every hemophiliac patient into a voting block. And then you turn every lupus patient into a voting block. That is what this country needs right now.
Well, I'm a fan of pointing out to people that while we call them rare diseases, the culmination of rare diseases affect 1 in 10 people, and that's as the patient, not even thinking about the people surrounding that patient. What other constituencies in this country are 1 in 10 people? So to your point, if we started treating ourselves as patients, as advocates, as voting blocks, and started operating in our relationship to our lawmakers and our policymakers as voting blocks and representative of voting blocks, how might that change the paradigm? How might that change the power balance in the relationship? I mean, I think there's a lot of wisdom there, Matt, and I definitely think you're the right kind of person to be leading that charge. So please promise that you'll continue to provide updates through the summer, because I, for one, would like to be at a minimum aware of that, if not a part of it myself.
I think I've already dragged you in without you knowing about it.
I'm not surprised to hear that. Before I let you go, you mentioned your 2 boys earlier, and I want to give you a chance as a dad. We're talking here in the beginning of June. We're We're upon the summer. Is there anything as a dad that you're in particular looking forward to this summer?
So I mentioned before they went from meatloafs to sentient, and now they're 15.
Yeah.
My twins. I love watching them grow up.
Mm.
You know, everyone says it goes fast, and it does, but I don't miss what it used to be. I love the differences. I love that it changes. I love that it's endlessly hysterical to see who they're becoming. And we're taking our first family vacation since the pandemic this summer to Disneyland, and my family out west, and they are so excited. They are as excited as they were in 2015 when they were 5, which was the last time we took a vacation to go. This is the summer I'm teaching them how to drive. This is the summer they got their working papers. This is the summer they're getting internships. And this is the summer where I pinch myself every day. How the hell am I alive 29 years later? How the hell can I look back and see, holy shit, what has my life been that I'm just so damn blessed to have happened to be in these places and able to do all these things in support of the other people who don't have it and deserve it in the space. But the question I get asked is, what do I think about at 3 a.m. when I'm stressed? I think about my kids, and that I'm lucky enough to have them. Many people can't or don't. The world of infertility and disease, you know this very well. They are the reason I am, and they are what guide me to try to make the world a better place.
Well, that's a beautiful note to end on. Matthew Zachary, podcaster, keynote speaker, author, Cancer Maverick, innovator. He is the host of the Out of Patience podcast, and he's also the person behind the audio documentary series, The Cancer Mavericks, A History of Survivorship. We'll have links in the program notes. And thanks for joining me. It's been, again, so many years since we last connected. I thought this would be a great opportunity to see your face, hear your voice, and just get to connect again. So thanks for giving me some time today for Bloodstream. I appreciate you, man.
I've always been one of your biggest fans, and I remain that way.
All right. Thank you, MZ. Matthew, thank you again to Dr. Erik Berntorp for joining the program today. Thanks, as always, to our presenting sponsor, Takeda, bleedingdisorders.com for more. And thanks to everyone who helped make this episode of the Bloodstream Podcast possible. Bordeaux, our next episode's only a week away, July 18th. What can listeners expect to hear then? You kind of already gave them a spoiler alert.
I know, gave him a spoiler. We've got a phenomenal vWD story from our own community. Rick Lindfors is a avid listener of the podcast. He listens all the time. Rick, shout out. And he gets to join us to tell us his story, which is, I do have to say, awesome.
I would agree. Agree. And we talk about dogs, so what's not to like?
It's going to be great.
And with that is all for this episode. Be sure to subscribe to the Bloodstream Podcast wherever you listen and leave us a review. 5 stars is preferred.
And loyal listeners, as always, email us at mailbag@bloodstreammedia.com to inquire about casting opportunities, to share your story here on the podcast, and to stay connected. You can also find us on social media. It's Bloodstream Media on all those channels, and you can also reach out to Patrick and myself.
I'm your host, Patrick James Lynch.
And I am your other host, Amy Board.
And until next time, take self-care of yourself. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.